On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
That's the sound of protests earlier this week in Toronto, outside the Casa Loma Event Center, where a former Israeli ambassador was the keynote speaker at a gala fundraising dinner for the Jewish advocacy group known as the Abraham Global Peace Initiative. About 50 protesters blocked access while the guests were trying to drive in and park. Toronto police arrested at least 2 people. Charges included assaulting a police officer and assaulting a couple of pro-Israel guests, wearing a mask as a disguise, and mischief. In Montreal on the same night, anti-Israel protesters harassed guests entering a fundraising event honoring wounded Israeli soldiers. It was being held at the Hever Kadisha synagogue by Beit HaLochem. Meanwhile, while all these incidents of intimidation and anti-Semitism have become commonplace in Canada since October 7th, this weekend, nearly 20 Canadians in the Toronto area who weren't born Jewish are spending the Shavuot holiday realizing a spiritual dream. They're becoming official members of the Jewish community, converts to Judaism. They've spent a year or more studying with local Reform rabbis and participating in the Reform movement's formal conversion program. One such ceremony is set for the Solel congregation in Mississauga, while for others still in the final stages of conversion, this week their cases went before a rabbinical council of rabbis who had to certify their learning and then take them to the mikveh for a ritual bath. Canadian rabbis of all denominations have been reporting increased interest since October 7th from people wanting to become Jews.
Our students are really exemplifying what it is to live with a Jewish identity that is centered in joy and in pride and not in being defined by the exterior or in suffering or fear. And I think that's what we all need to lean into. So I say thank God for these students and these people who are saying, yes, we are with you.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Friday, May 30th, 2025. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, and made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Gronowski-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. If you've been a regular listener to this podcast, you may remember before Hanukkah, we brought you my interview with 3 converts about why they're doing it, especially now when it's really challenging to be a proud Jew in public. If you missed the episode, don't forget to listen to it. We put the link in our show notes. Their stories were deeply moving, and the reason we spoke with them was because Rabbi Stephen Wise of Oakville's Reform Shari Bethel congregation approached me and told me there were dozens, perhaps hundreds of people who've been flocking to Jewish conversion courses recently in Canada. So much so they had to cap class registration numbers and put people on waiting lists. The Toronto Introduction to Jewish Life classes have 56 people converting in the pipeline right now. And so as we approach Shavuot, the biblical holiday where we also read the story of Ruth, the Moabite woman who married into the Jewish faith and after her husband had died, told her mother-in-law Naomi, quote, "Where you go, I'll go, and your people will be my people." And so I wanted to find out what's behind the rise in interest in conversions and what inspiration can it lend now to a community currently suffering under the weight of hatred. Rabbi Stephen Wise joins me now, along with Rabbi Taylor Baruchel of Toronto's Holy Blossom Temple, where she's the Director of Outreach and Next Gen Engagement. And by the way, Rabbi Wise's congregation had to go to court earlier this year and recently won an order to keep a noisy anti-Israel protester from picketing close to the synagogue every Shabbat. Rabbi Wise, we heard from you about this story, so I'll give you full credit because you sent us an email saying, guys, we're getting a flood of converts and we can't even accommodate everybody. So I'm fascinated by this. Can you walk us through the background to why you decided people needed to know about this?
Yeah, well, look around the world, it doesn't seem like things are going well for the Jewish people. And then I go to a meeting of the Reform rabbis of Greater Toronto, and I hear that the doors are beating down to try and become Jewish. And so much so that we had to close the class because we just didn't have enough capacity for all the converts that want to be Jewish at this time. And I was just overwhelmed by such a response, especially in this year.
Rabbi Baruchel, what have you been seeing at Holy Blossom?
Well, I think it's really been a question of folks who have been Jewish adjacent for a very long time. Maybe they have Jewish family, they don't fully fit in a box, and it's always been something that they felt pulled towards. And then since October 7th, they've had a lot of clarity coming home of, no, this is my tribe. This is where I belong. And I really want to make that official. We've really been overwhelmed as well. We were actually restructuring how we take on students for conversion or affirmation. There's 4 rabbis at Holy Blossom, and we're still struggling to figure out how we can actually meet the demand that we're seeing.
Can we talk numbers before we get into some of the more interesting cases that you've either can start? What are we talking about in terms of numbers, and compare it maybe to last year?
We have something called the IJL class in Toronto and something called the GIC class in the Western communities, both very similar. So I'll speak first to the one I know more about, which is the Jewish information class. It's been running for since Mount Sinai, I think. It's been going for a long time. Arlene Botnick from Temple Solel is our teacher. When I started in 2007, I remember I'd send 2 or 3 converts from each of the synagogues in Mississauga, Hamilton, Oakville, and let's say a class would be 12 to 15 people, a typical year. But there's been an upswing lately, and even since October 7th, the numbers, I think, are closer to 30 people. So we are seeing a real uptick, and they come from all walks of life. I have a congregant from Iran, a man and his wife, who had been searching, learning. He says there's some evidence of Judaism in his family, but he emigrated to Canada many years ago, and him and his wife this year had been sort of thinking about it. Should we do it? Should we do it? October 7th happened, and 2 weeks later, they come to the synagogue, they meet with me, and they're like, we're ready to become Jewish now. And I'm like, you realize what just happened? And they're like, no, that's exactly why we're here. This Israel's under attack. The Jewish people are facing hatred and anti-Semitism. We want to cast our lot with the Jewish people today.
And so you're seeing this just in the Western sort of Jewish communities. What are we seeing in Toronto?
I think all the more so in the GTA, we've had, I actually was the lead educator for the Intro to Jewish Living course 2 years ago. And we already had a little bit of a surge then where we had about 60 people enrolled in a given semester. And now my colleague, Rabbi Bill Tepper, who leads it now, was telling us there's 90 screens. This is starting out on Zoom. They have education on Zoom, that there's 90, that you can't see everyone. It's 3 or 4 pages of Zoom screens to try to keep up with this demand, which is hence the conversation that Rabbi Weiss is talking about of how do we ensure quality and of experience and the ability to keep up with this. It's a huge surge.
So the process is an education for how many months? And then of those, let's say 90 or the ones you're seeing, how many actually are going through with it all the way to, I guess, the circumcision, mikvah? I don't know what you need to do. Tell me how that works.
Sure. So it's an academic year of study. It's 2 semesters, about, I'm not sure the exact amount of weeks, but close to 40, I would say. Wednesday evenings, it's a 3-hour class with an hour and 15 minutes of Hebrew, an hour and 50 minutes of Judaics. The Hebrew is taught in a smaller cohort. They have a little bit more attention there. And then the second part of Judaics is tag team taught by Reform ordained rabbis throughout the GTA. And it spans everything from Shabbat to specifically Reform Jewish Jewish practice and everything in between. As you can imagine, it's quite intensive. There's homework, there are exams. There's also a requirement to be meeting with your sponsoring rabbi. That is at the discretion of all of our colleagues. I know at Holy Blossom, we have a requirement of seeing you at least 4 times a month. That could be at tefillah, that could be at prayers, that could be at social programming, that could be volunteering. But we really need to see our people at least 4 times because Judaism is not a solo sport. You are joining a community, not just a personal choice you're making. And then you go to what if you are someone with a penis and you had not been circumcised, you will have to have a circumcision or hatafat dam brit, as well as then beit din and then mikveh.
That's prick of blood, right?
Yes, the ritual drawing of blood, yes.
Just for our listeners who don't speak Hebrew. So of the people that you're seeing who have come much more, are they saying to you that they got it from like an ancestry test as well? Are you hearing any of those, that they figured out that they were always Jewish, they just didn't know? Or is this more, I want to be Ruth, where you go, I go?
Yeah, it's generally a combination. I would say that you wouldn't believe the stories that we hear. In fact, every month when we gather, typically we'll spend a good part of our meeting just hearing some of the unique stories, because everyone's got a story. It doesn't matter if they come from a different country or they hear about some roots back in their own family genealogy. Sometimes, as Rabbi Bershel mentioned earlier, maybe they want to marry somebody who's Jewish. I mean, I met with a student today who's 20 years old from Vancouver who is focused on becoming Jewish, and he's quite young. So, we want to make sure that he's ready for this big choice in his life. But his plan is to go to Israel. He's already living in Israel. He spent 6 months there. He's back, but he wants to join the Israeli army and fight for the Jewish people. So we're definitely seeing all kinds of different things. Like Rabbi Vershel sort of outlined the typical case of a convert coming and interested, but we also have so many unusual cases that we often will meet to try and figure out what's the best way to guide this person towards Judaism.
Are you seeing this from your colleagues across the country, or is this just an Ontario phenomenon?
Yeah, we're seeing it everywhere. We have a rabbi's Facebook group, as does everybody, and someone posted the other day, is anyone seeing a rise in conversion students? And I quickly put in, certainly. In fact, we're capping a class because it's so full, and comments started popping in one by one. Yes, and this is from across Canada, across the United States, in bigger communities like in Florida, New York, California, but even in the smaller communities across the Midwest, all over the place. It's unbelievable.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
And I just want to say again that this is a difficult time to be Jewish. Like, why now, of all times, would there be a rise in people interested in Judaism? It doesn't seem correct. And I think what I hope and pray for is that there are people out there who are very much behind the Jewish people, who are ready to cast a lot. As I said earlier, they're ready to. It's not just thinking about it, but they're really to, put their faith into action and actually come meet with a rabbi, come into the synagogue walls, start learning, start studying, and broadcast that they are proud to be Jewish. If I could give just one more example of this, I'm taking a little bit of a segue, but I was in Chicago last spring with a group of students from our youth group, about 20 of us, and we were walking in the downtown area, and as we were coming up towards Michigan Avenue, we could hear something going on, some sort of rally. I'm hearing, voices and all kinds of things, and I realized pretty quickly that this was a pro-Palestinian rally coming down the street. And I looked at our kids, all of whom are teenagers, and I'm thinking to myself, do I walk towards this thing? Are kids going to be nervous? Are they scared? Do we want to get in? I don't want to get in a confrontation, like trying to figure out how to handle the situation. And one of the students, Noah, looks at me and he says, "Rabbi," stars out, and he reaches into his necklace, the big Jewish star, and he says, "Should I have my Magen David out? Stars out, Rabbi." And I looked at all their faces and I said, "Yes, stars out. Like, let's take that star out, wear it proudly around our neck, and walk up towards Michigan Avenue and see what's going on." And that's kind of what I'm seeing in these people who are interested in conversion. It stars out. Like, let's show pride. Let's show who we are. If I'm feeling it inside, I now want to show it on the outside. And I think that's been one of the most impressive things about this phenomenon.
Both of us are having emotional reaction to hear
A huge emotional reaction, and it actually reminds me of a student that I worked with. She started her process before October 7th, so this is someone who felt compelled, but I have to say, I think it was October 10th or 11th was a Friday where they called for a day of rage in 2023. That was a terrifying day. I had parents calling at me to say, "Are you sending your daughter to school?" She was at a Jewish preschool. Where, "Rabbi, I'm taking the mezuzah off my door. I'm that scared. Does God hate me for that?" And all these very difficult conversations. And I remember that day just going, "Okay, let's just get through Shabbat. Let's just get through and we'll be okay." And right a little bit before sundown, my phone dings, and it's a message from one of our students. And she said, "I just realized this is the last Shabbat before I'm going to be Jewish," because she had a mikvah date the next week. "And I am so excited." And I burst into tears, and I thought, thank God for you, that here's the Jewish world. We're terrified, rightly so. It's as my colleague said, it's a frightening time, and yet here is someone who's rushing and rejoicing in claiming this identity for herself, for claiming our Torah for herself and our people as her people, and that is something that has held me, I've held very close to my heart during these months and it's been time and time again.
Is there a special, I don't know, module or whatever you call it, because of the anti-Semitism since October 7th, that you're now equipping them that maybe the course didn't have before? Because as one rabbi I asked in the Orthodox community who was also seeing this phenomenon, I said to him, "Why are they doing it?" And he said, I don't think he was joking. He said they're masochists. But I mean, it was funny. But I mean, so the question is there a special training they're receiving because they have to face stuff maybe converts haven't faced before?
We definitely have a module on anti-Semitism that has always been a part of it. I think it has become more robust, as has our discussion of Israel.
Yeah, it's something that our students ask about sometimes as the class begins, open up for a few just questions before we get into the main curriculum. And the questions come up, especially if there's been some sort of bombing, some sort of specific attack, whatever the news of the week is, it often will come up in that class because it's a safe space to talk about it. And before anyone becomes, a participant in this class, we ask them the major questions. Why you would like to be Jewish? Do you understand what's happening in the Jewish world? So I asked them point blank. I'm like, what's going on in the world. Like, are you ready to start this process today? And without fail, they're ready and they have questions. Not only that, in some places, and maybe Rabbi Baruchel can say the same, they fill the sanctuary with so much love and devotion because this is an active choice they made as adults. So they come regularly. They bring friends. They sit there with smiles on their faces. They are Jewish to the core now that they have joined in with the Jewish people. And I couldn't be happier to do that part of my role as a rabbi, to help usher in these people into our faith. It's one of the greatest things that I can do. Absolutely agreed with that. It's one of the greatest privileges, I think, and a blessing. I know it's definitely makes me feel very fulfilled in my rabbinate to work with these folks and help them find what is theirs and claim their Torah. And we see time and time again when we do have couples that we work with,
Often the Jew by birth doesn't appreciate the beautiful traditions, heritage, and faith that they've been born into with that status, and that it's their partner who is choosing Judaism that brings them closer in. And we'll see from Jewish partners being like, oh, I never really saw how cool this was, or how interesting, or how rich. And I think, well, probably because you stopped engaging with this when you were 13. Can you imagine the rest of the other things in your life if your evolution with it, if your relationship with it just halted at 13? That's like it's not the height of your own emotional maturity and development. But now that you can take that, they'll have these people who are coming in just saying, oh, look at this, doing the research and loving Torah Lishma, learning for its own sake, is just a deeply and perhaps not exclusively uniquely Jewish, but deeply Jewish tradition of let's start with learning and framing with that. It's like the Apple, there's an app for that, there's a text for that, there's a bracha for that. We can find ways to imbue our lives with that. And I think we see that with folks who are choosing Judaism to a really deep extent. Sometimes Jews by choice make the absolute best choose.
I was going to ask about one more thing. You mentioned Israel. Of course, there are the, I guess, dichotomies of if you convert as a Reformed Jew and then you want to marry in Israel or marry an Orthodox, it's problematic, and some have converted twice or some aren't accepted. So did the converting class that you teach, do they know this? And are some of them going further to, I guess, double convert so they can have full rights in Israel and marriage?
I think I can speak for us. We are explicitly clear about that. Maybe not all of the Jewish world is going to recognize this conversion. I think for most of our people, they're not looking to head further. But it is important to note that a Reform conversion is recognized by the state of Israel for the purposes of Aliyah. Marriage and being recognized by the Rabbanut is another piece. I also put that up with not all of, look, I am my smicha document says that I am a rabbi, Rav Yisrael. I'm a rabbi in Israel. Not all of Am Yisrael will recognize me as such. There's different pieces in spectrum with that. Are there people who absolutely go and try to go further? Yeah, that is going to be a thing. But I wouldn't say it's further. It's just about getting the proper hechsher. There's Orthodox rabbis who don't recognize each other's conversions at the end of the day. So,
okay, is there anything that you would like our listeners to understand about why you think this story is so important to tell and share at this time?
Well, I guess I'll go first just because I was the one who pitched the idea, but imagine going to a meeting and sitting in a room and hearing that we have to stop the amount of people converting to Judaism because we can't handle the capacity. We don't have enough rabbis. We don't have enough teachers. This is a great problem to have, and that's a problem we were ready to solve. We are overwhelmed with gratitude that so many people are choosing Judaism at this time. We're ready for you. The doors are open. We want to have those conversations. We want to guide you there. We can build up the capacity for whatever is necessary, but we're just excited by this phenomenon. It's taken us a step back. We're like, wow, what is happening? Okay, now let's roll up our sleeves and let's get down to business and help these people who are interested.
And I think it's a feel-good story for the Jewish people at a time when we can feel very isolated and very alone. I know we've consistently said, where are our friends? Here they are. Enough that they're stepping up and saying, I am with you. I want to be one of you officially. I want to own this for myself at a time when that can seem all the more problematic to do so, that they are doing it with joy and with love, and they're rushing into our arms to do that. And I, for one, am very proud and honored to be able to help guide that. And I think we need more of these feel-good stories these days.
Honestly, stars out for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, a podcast made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Gwinovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Our show is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman and Andrea Varsany. Michael Freeman is our executive producer, and our music is by Dov Beck-Levine. Thanks for listening, and apologies for my throat. I have a little bit of a sinus thing going on. Happy Shavuot.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.